This lesson will look at how we breathe. We're going to explore the proper terminology for that, which is ventilation, and we're going to explain how we manage to get air into and out of our lungs. These are the learning objectives for this lesson. Please make sure that you are able to achieve all of these by the end of the lesson. The key words for today should be fairly familiar by now. A lot of these you've met before in the previous lesson. I just want to draw your attention to the fact that you should have or should be reading pages 89 to 91 of your textbook and completing pages 9 to 12 of your class booklet by the end of this lesson. Okay, again, there's a short video providing an alternative point of view on ventilation if you'd like to watch that. Otherwise, we'll continue on. So key terms that you need to know to understand how breathing occurs. First of all, as I said, the process of breathing in and out air is known as ventilation. That's a term that you need to know. You can't refer to it as respiration because we refer to cellular respiration for the production of ATP in cells, and this gets quite confusing, so it's easier to separate them. So ventilation is the process by which air is moved into and out of the lungs, and this is all to do with airflow. Now, air will always move from an area of high pressure to lower pressure, similar to diffusion from high to low concentration. So therefore, the pressure difference in the lungs helps to drive this process. This diagram here is just showing how that process of ventilation works. Now, it recruits the entire thorax, that's this region of the chest, and there are two parts to this. There is inspiration and expiration. So to inspire or to inhale is commonly known as breathing in. You'll notice in this picture, when you are breathing in, this sheet of muscle here, the diaphragm, contracts and it pulls downward. Okay, so when it's contracting, it's pulling this dome-shaped sheet taut and it's pulling it downwards. While that's happening, the rib cage moves up and out and the lungs inflate with air. Because that's happening, air is inspired or breathed in. The opposite is happening with expiration or exhalation, so this is breathing out. You can see that this diaphragm relaxes, it goes back into its original dome shape. The rib cage, instead of moving up and out, it goes back into its relaxed position of down and in, and the lungs deflate. Now, we've alluded to the fact that pressure is really important here. So we need to understand the relationship between pressure and volume of gases. This little cartoon here explains it really well. So when you have a large volume, gas particles can move around quite freely, so they have a large volume to move around in. They're not so crowded, so therefore the space that they are in allows there to be less pressure. If we decrease that volume, as we're seeing here, these same gas particles have got less space or less volume to be in, so therefore the pressure will increase because they're going to bump into each other a lot more. So to summarize, what we're saying is that the relationship between pressure and volume is inversely proportional. So what that means is as volume increases, the pressure will decrease and vice versa. If we look at gases in relation to ventilation, first of all, we're going to be looking at what happens when you breathe in. Before we start discussing air pressure, we're going to be looking at the anatomy of the respiratory system. So first of all, we know that we have ribs covering the lungs. So these bony structures are there to protect it. And in between the ribs, we have intercostal muscles. Now, intercostal muscles are a skeletal muscle that attaches to the rib bones, and their function is to move the rib cage. So when the intercostal muscles contract, they pull that rib cage up and out. So when you take a big breath in, you feel your rib cage moving up and out, and that's because of the action of the intercostal muscles. At the same time, that dome-shaped diaphragm in its relaxed position will start to contract. And when it contracts, it pulls tight and it moves it down the way. Now, all of that action creates space inside the lungs. Now, that space has to be filled. So what happens is air from the outside is drawn into the lungs because of the pressure. So just to recap on what we said, when we inspire, the diaphragm contracts and flattens. We can also see that the external intercostal muscles contract. So that's the intercostal muscles on the outside of the rib cage contract. And they will move the rib cage up and out. And what happens is the volume of that entire chest cavity will increase. This allows the lungs to expand. So they're blowing up like balloons almost. And this pleural membrane allows that to happen. Now, because the lungs are large, empty spaces, the air pressure inside the lungs is much less than outside. So if you remember that picture of the two gas jars, this is the one with more space. The pressure is less because there's more space. And we know that pressure will force air to move from high to low. Okay? Therefore, we have air being drawn into the lungs to equalize or balance out that pressure. If you look at expiration, it's simply the reverse situation. So expiration is breathing out. So instead of the intercostal muscles and the diaphragm contracting, they will relax. The volume of the chest or the thorax gets less or small. And because the pressure inside the lungs is increasing, they have high pressure in here and it's pushing the air back out through your nose and mouth. So just to summarize what's happening, the diaphragm relaxes and bulges into the chest cavity and it's pushing upwards. The external intercostal muscles relax and therefore the rib cage will start to move down and in. This will ensure that the volume of the lungs gets smaller, therefore the pressure increases. Now, because the air pressure in the lungs is greater than outside, that air is forced outwards. So airflow outside of the lungs equalizes that air pressure and we reset and that process of ventilation occurs again. So this is just a summary of inspiration and expiration. Please make sure that you understand the processes involved. Please make sure that you are also able to name each of the anatomical sections, such as the ribs, intercostal muscles, diaphragm, lungs, and you're able to explain what happens to each during inspiration and expiration, why it happens, and the direction of airflow in relation to pressure. Okay, that's the end of this lesson. It's a short one today. Just a reminder, please make sure that you complete pages 9 to 12 of your class booklet and make sure that you read pages 89 to 91 of your textbook to help you through this.